Okay, so here we are live once again. Look at a big pile of stuff here I got to get rid of. But the recycling was full, so because it got backed up a couple weeks ago, the whole thing. So I got another DC Superpowers unboxing for us to open today, and this is the Flash. This is the Wally West version of the Flash. I have here what was the Barry Allen version of the Flash. I was considering this one to be Wally West anyway, because I already had the original Superpowers Flash. So like that one was Barry Allen, this one was Wally. But they made this one that's actually Wally. That's a repaint of this one. It's not an exact recolor. It does have some paint differences besides the coloration, but we'll get into all that. There's a nice piece of artwork here. I suspect that that's by Mike Zeck, who does a lot of the style guide art these days. And usually, when Zach does the style guide art, he kind of tries to stay within the style of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, the main style guide artist since the 80s. But he's a Bronze Age guy himself. He goes back to Marvel comics in the 80s. He drew Secret Wars, which of course was Marvel's competitor for Superpowers. He drew that comic book. He was also my favorite Captain America artist, and I think that this is probably him doing this piece of artwork here. But it's not in the style of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, at least not completely. It's also got a little bit of flavor of Mike Wieringo, who was the artist of The Flash in the early 1990s. Unfortunately, an artist that passed away far too soon. We lost him like quite a few years back. But man, that guy was a great artist, and I miss seeing his stuff on the stands to this day. So we can see that this has a darker coloration of red, and it's got gold boots, belt, uh, trim around the gloves, lightning bolts on the head, etc. We got the cross cell artwork on the back. This is a slightly older figure than what I've been opening lately, because there's been like at least one wave since then, and with maybe even more. Let me look at the back. Yeah, I think there's been at least one wave since, maybe two, because there's the wave. Yeah. There's been two waves since then. So we had the wave with Hal Jordan and Sinestro and the Justice Lords, Superman and Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, and we had the wave with Batmanga, Batman, and Kilowog, and Blue Beetle, and Brainiac. So yeah, he's one I kind of hadn't really thought about buying him for a while. I'd see him at GameStop occasionally. I've seen him at a few GameStops, and it's one of those things where I always just had something a little more exciting to buy at the time than a simple Flash repaint. But it's not quite as simple as I thought once I examined him a little bit. So we're going to get into some of the differences when we talk about this. But first, let's read the bio on the back. His name is Wally West. He is the fastest man alive. From Kid Flash to the Flash, Wally has lived one of the strangest lives of any speedster, traversing multiple planes of existence just to find his way back home. And then they did a really stupid storyline where they turned him into a serial killer, but we're not going to talk about that. let's just pretend that never happened. So we'll go ahead and open them up. And this one does seem like the card is fairly well glued, the package. I'm going to set that over there. I've got a stack of these over on the other side of the room, so I'm going to put it with those in a minute. Take them out of the bubble. And here we are. That's a pretty sharp looking figure, isn't it? So there we go. And I feel like I'm about to sneeze. And when you feel like you're about to sneeze like this, you know that you're not actually going to sneeze. It's just one of those little cock tease sneezes, cock sneeze. So anyway, so one of the interesting things I think about Mcfarlane's version of the Flash is that these boots are a separate molded piece of plastic from the upper part of the shins, and I imagine they probably did that to cut down on paint rub. But if you look at the original Superpowers Flash, which I have around here somewhere, I'm pretty sure. There you go. Here he is. Dig him out from under there. One of the first things to get kind of scuffed up on this guy is the toes. You can see with like the boots painted yellow and then molded in red. Of course, that's going to scuff up a bit. Anytime I see a superpower Flash that's loose, I always check a couple of things to see if they're scuffed up. One is the toes and one is the nose. Always the toes, always the nose. And usually, the belt's got a little bit of scuff on it. The wrist cuffs have a little bit of scuff on them. Maybe the ears, but usually it's the toes and the belt. And of course, mine the emblem's a little scuffed up too. But oh well. So yeah, I had thought that this was just they just did him in different colors, but there are a couple of differences that I think are interesting. One is that they repainted his eyes. So you can see that the Barry Allen version has flesh color painted on the inside of the eye holes in the masks, and then it has a little pupil and eyelash like the original figure had. Pretty simple paint job. I don't believe there's a white to the eyes, just a black dot and an eyelash. And this Wally West version actually has white dots for eyes, which is pretty typical of most Wally West figures because that's how he's often drawn in the comics. Sometimes you can see his eyeballs, but not all the time. But I notice if you look at the artwork on the package from the model sheets, you can see that he's got like some black around his eyes. And in this figure, they actually did bother to paint in the black around the eyes. So this is a completely different paint pattern for the eyes than what they had on the previous figure, which means they had to go through the effort of making an all-new paint masking for this guy. So that's pretty impressive that they went that extra yard. Also, if you look at his wrists, where the glove cuff is, this is a much more simplified glove cuff on the original figure, whereas this one has a little more detail to it. This one isn't even really a lightning bolt so much as it's just kind of a zigzag around his forearm, which maybe that's accurate to the New 52 version of Flash. I don't know. I didn't read a whole lot of New 52 comics. But this is more accurate to the Flash as I grew up with, where it's an actual lightning bolt all the way around his wrist. So I like the colors of this with the darker red. It should remind anybody of really any live action version of the Flash. They tend to put him into a darker red than the bright red like he has in the comics, and also the gold on the wrists and the belt and the ears and the boots. And this is not a particularly metallic gold, at least where it's plastic, but it is definitely a darker yellow sort of color, almost tan, but still yellow enough to be yellow, I think. I'm kind of surprised they didn't go for a more metallic sheen on the boots and the belt and the ears. But, there you go. It definitely has the metallic look on the emblem and on the gloves. So I kind of wonder why they did that. Maybe it wasn't intentional. I don't know. But yeah, it reminds me a lot, and it probably should remind me a lot of John Wesley Shipp on the Flash television show. Now, he wasn't playing Wally. He was playing Barry. But in the comics at the time, it was still Wally. And they did want the Flash in the comic book, whether he's Wally or Barry or what, they did want him to look more like what he looked like on the TV show. And the Flash's costume on the TV show was really cool. Like, it had that sort of molded muscle look of the Batman suit from the movie that came out like a couple of years before. Actually, I think it was only like 1 year because that came out in late 1990, right? Yeah. So it definitely had that sort of look to it, and they put like this flocking over it. They gave it kind of this fuzzy look. My stepdad looked like he was covered in the female half of Velcro. But yeah, so it looks a lot like that version of the Flash's costume on the TV show, and they made the Flash look more like that in the comic book at the time, with more of a metallic red and instead of the fuzziness, because that wouldn't really translate to the comics very well. So they gave it more of a metallic sheen to it. But still, it was able to, since it had a metallic sheen to it, that was able to put more black shading onto the suit and make it look darker. And I think making it in this darker crimson red, it kind of echoes both of those I think anyway. So it's a nice homage to the old TV show of the Flash. I think, even though it's not obviously not specifically supposed to be a figure of John Wesley Shipp, and not even supposed to be the same character in that it's Wally instead of Barry, but it still has a really nice look to him. So I'm really glad that I picked this up. I know, like I said, I've just been kind of passing them by. So I'm like, do I really need another repaint of the Flash? But it just came one of those weeks where I had a little bit of extra money, and you know, at the same time, there wasn't really anything at GameStop that I wanted to buy that week. So I was like, what the hell? We'll go ahead and pick him up. And I'm glad that I did, because he's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and have a look at his articulation. So the head, of course, rotates all the way around, and the arms rotate all the way around at the shoulder. Again, this is simple 80s action figure articulation. Back in the 80s, we only had 5 points of articulation usually. Unless you had G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe had a ton of articulation, but most figures followed that Star Wars pattern where, like, you could turn the head and you could turn the arms and you can move the legs up and down. They go back about that far. The leg goes forward about that far, so you can do the splits no problem. And then superpowers, unlike most 80s action figures, had an extra joint of articulation at the knees, and that's really good on a speedster like the Flash, whose superpower is running. So then you can actually get him into a pretty good running pose. Now, of course, the original Superpowers Flash, since the original Superpowers had power actions, you could squeeze his legs and pretend he was running that way. Mine doesn't work as well as it used to, obviously, because this is a 40-year-old toy, but it still somewhat works. So that's nice. But Mcfarlane didn't go all that far out with the power actions and everything. It's just a figure that's in the same scale and style and articulation scheme as the original Superpowers. I know a lot of people are really bummed that Mcfarlane figures don't have the power actions, but I don't mind so much necessarily. I think it's okay. And just for fun, let's compare him to the Multiverse Flash figure that Mcfarlane recently put out, Walmart exclusive. And you can see that this version of Wally has the brighter red, like the original Superpowers, the brighter yellow. Although it does have, like, I think kind of a not necessarily metallic sheen on the boots, but on the belt and the emblem, it does have like a slightly like Inca gold kind of metallic sheen. And you can see that he also has the same black around the eyes that the Superpowers version of Wally has. So that's pretty cool. So I definitely recommend picking this figure up. If you're somebody like me that's been kind of sleeping on it because, it's just another repaint of the Flash, well, I think it's unique enough that that it definitely makes it worth picking up. And I think they did a good job, even though it's the same mold, of making them look like two distinct characters. These are clearly two different versions of the Flash, and I think it gave him enough personality with the eyes to kind of make him stand out a little bit. So that's pretty cool. So I don't know, like for me, when I first started seriously collecting comic books, it was around the time of Crisis. So I didn't really actually read too many comics with Barry Allen as the Flash. He wasn't really the guy I grew up with. Now, I did get on the ground floor when they did the post-Crisis Flash series, and Wally was the Flash in that. So I always got a soft spot for him. He was always the Flash I grew up with. And then you had the Justice League animated series where Wally was the Flash on that. So I was actually kind of disappointed when they brought Barry back. I thought Barry was more interesting as a character that was kind of like this fallen idol that the other superheroes kind of look to as, kind of an emblem of a bygone age. I think he worked kind of really well with that in New Frontier, which is, of course, one of my favorite comics. And I thought Darwin Cook, may he rest in peace, did an excellent job writing Barry Allen in that. And I kind of feel like that was the most interesting version of Barry Allen that I'd ever read. I thought he had a very distinct personality on his own. Now, unfortunately, once they brought Barry Allen back, I guess they realized he didn't really have that much of a personality in the older comics. So they just kind of started to write him like Wally West. So what's the point of bringing back Barry Allen if you're just going to write him like he's Wally West? No, just keep Wally West. Just keep him as the Flash. Why not? Now, I do think the main reason they probably brought back Barry was, if you had to explain the origin of the Flash, you explain the origin of Barry Allen and you've explained his origin. But to explain the origin of Wally West, you also have to explain the origin of Barry Allen, so that makes it a little more complicated. So I kind of figured they brought back Barry so that they could simplify it for the movie. But then when they did it in the movie, it wasn't even an origin story. It was an adaptation of Flashpoint, kind of. And well, let's not talk about the Flash movie right now. I'll do a video talking about the Flash movie at some point, because I do have some things to say about that. But kind of funny that after that movie came out, they started to play up Wally in the comics a lot more, huh? Like, maybe we should go back to him being the main Flash. That might be a good thing after that movie. So. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe. All the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this figure and the character of Wally West in general. I'm interested to hear what you think about him. That's pretty much it. We will talk to you next time. Bye.